What is up, my beautiful gemstones? Thank you guys so much for being members, and I hope you all are ready because I've got a real treat for you guys today. It's been a really long time, over a year, since I've posted a listener encounters video here on the GemmaJade channel, and I had a hard time choosing which encounters to use for this one. If you sent in your encounter and I didn't use it for this one, don't worry, because I plan on doing many more videos of the listener encounters, and I don't turn any encounters away for the most part. Also, I do edit for clarity, meaning, spelling, and grammar, but I never change the overall story. Like, the story arc and the details always stay the same, and I keep them true to what the person who sent the encounter in meant and was trying to say. I keep anyone anonymous who asks me to or who doesn't explicitly say one way or another whether they want to be named or not, and I do that for privacy reasons. So if you want me to use your full name, please just tell me it's okay to do so. I do my best, and I really don't want to alienate anyone, but mistakes do sometimes happen, and if you're using a YouTube handle, I sometimes won't know what to do and just have to use my better judgment. Now, with all of that being said, I really hope you guys are ready for this one because it's insane, and I am honored that you all chose me and my gemstones to share your strange experiences with. Grab a snack, maybe something to drink, and let's just jump right in. Our first encounter comes from a friend of mine named Michael, who says, quote, "Hi again, I thought I would share with you my experience of living in a house that emits a 3-block portal that I can only describe as a terror in reality. I was desperate because my apartment building where I lived had been sold, and the new owner decided to throw out every tenant in the building. I found a shared house, a split level. I chose the upper floor, and my housemate chose the daylight basement. The first week was hectic as I was working 55 hours a week as a home health CNA. As everything settled, I began noticing the strange experiences beginning. Kitchen cupboards opening and sounds of walking and low conversation, always like hearing through a wall or kind of hollow sounding. Lights, waves of emotions not my own, waves of mental impressions and strangeness that I interpret as non-human. The first major incident was what I call the meeting. I heard talking that woke me up from sleep. I've never been able to sleep with my bedroom door closed, so when I woke, I saw a multi-hued glow coming from the living room. So I got up, walked into the living room. Gathered in my living room was the weirdest glowing group of creatures. From what I would call a winged fairy, very insect looking, a tree person, and a dozen or more even stranger creatures. As I walked in further, they all turned in my direction. I don't know why I wasn't scared because none looked human. I knew they meant me no harm. I just said calmly, as long as you mean good, you can stay. The rules are don't harm me, my stuff, or the guy downstairs. Now, if you please, use telepathy instead of audible words because I need to sleep. If you can't do this, leave now. I felt almost chagrined acceptance, and I turned and went to bed. In the morning, I woke up and I knew it was real and how I felt and what I saw was real. Chairs and items moved from their places in the living room. I thought to myself, WTF? How I wasn't shocked or scared, I don't know. It was like the core me, the spiritual side, knew what they were and how I was in no danger. Probably the most dangerous situation, spiritually speaking, then happened. This happened just before I moved out. I was sleeping when a sense of danger woke me up. I saw a dark figure in a bowler hat stood in the corner of my room. I sensed the figure was wearing a 1920s style plaid suit. Yeah, weird. Then a dark, very shapely feminine figure materialized over my legs and slowly, seductively positioned itself over my hips. I couldn't see a face except glowing eyes amidst the long hair over her face and eyes. It was blacker than black. I laughed. Why? Because I'm gay. Point blank, I find the female form beautiful, but am absolutely not in any way attracted to her. The woman thing radiated anger and confusion and vanished, as did the hat man who had been standing watching the entire situation. I knew it was a succubus. The very next night was a repeat of the first, but with a naked male figure. I just knew, was the same creature, just presenting another outward form. And yes, the hat man was there too. When it crouched over me, radiating seduction, again, righteous anger boiled up. I grabbed it by its spirit family jewels and said, "Get out and stay out. You are not and never will be welcomed here." They both fled. I felt a strength of soul that was empowered from God. Hard to explain, but that's the best I can do. That woke me up. The next day was my day off, and boy was I off. I had been in a mental fog because of the eviction and working, unpacking, and its turmoil. I truly opened up my awareness to the other side. I saw the house/property was in a portal. I followed it through the neighborhood for 3 blocks one direction and a block on the other side of the property. It was a rift or tear in reality. I have never seen it like this before or since. Needless to say, I moved again within a month. Every word is true and not an exaggeration. End quote. There's a lot to unpack here. So I will never ever call anyone a liar or publicly question anyone else's experience as they're telling it to me, but I do have some questions about this particular experience. First of all, I think it's so interesting that Michael didn't feel any fear when he walked into the living room full of creatures, but that's not uncommon when dealing with elementals, which is what more than likely you experienced. So I feel like, from what I understood, you were saying that the elemental thing happened after the succubus, incubus type thing happened. But the way that you wrote it was like because you said that you were dealing with the eviction, right? You know, as you were dealing with the incubus, succubus, hatman type thing. And then you talked about being in the new house. So I don't know why you wrote it or worded it like that, but it was a little bit confusing, but just so everyone understands. So let's talk about the shadow person, incubus/succubus. Now, the thing that's weird to me about that situation is that you don't have to be heterosexual for a succubus to attack you or to take from you sexually or in any other way, because we don't give our permission. So does it help if you're attracted? Sure, but the succubus wouldn't have needed you to be attracted to get you to be able to perform. And she also, or it also, wouldn't have needed your consent. So that is very interesting. So I'm wondering if maybe you were dealing with something other than a demonic presence and maybe something presenting to you like an incubus or succubus. And I'm going to go so far as to say possibly a fairy creature, because they are evil a lot of the time. They are lower vibrational. They do SA human beings. And a lot of the time they do need your cooperation. Where the Hat Man fits in with all this, he may have just been passing through the portal and happened to see it. Now, I've seen this, and I've even said it to several people that have come to me, like for video calls, like where I noticed their attachments and I sent them things to help them and walk them through it, where a lot of the time this will happen. A rift will create where you will just have a line of entities, deceased, spirits and non-human spirits just coming through, like kind of like one of those, what are they called? You just stand on it and it moves. I forgot what it's called. Escalator, but escalator goes up. I don't know. You guys know what I'm talking about. They have them at the airport. Like one of those. And until the portal's closed, you are constantly going to be attacked and things like that. You could also just end up with like some really weird feelings and things like that as well. So I think what may have happened here is when you opened yourself up spiritually, I don't know how you did that. The interaction or encounter itself could have very well opened you up to be more spiritual than you were originally before it happened to you. You probably took that heightened spiritual awareness to the new place. And when you saw the elemental creatures in your living room, you kind of knew, again, inside and spiritually, that they weren't there to hurt you, although you probably annoyed them a little bit by setting rules down. But it's good that you did, because we always want to lay down the law in our own personal space to not only elementals, but all entities and creatures as well. Once you do that and establish that you are in charge, it is your space, whether it be your physical energy or your actual space that you live in, work in, play in, are in, It's a really good way to establish a boundary and see what is going to stick around and what isn't, and what's going to fight you back and what isn't. Now, luckily for you, the elementals really didn't want anything from you. They were probably just using that space, used to being in that space, or followed you from the other place. And you never saw them in the other place because the lower vibrational beings, the Hat Man, the Fey creature that you thought was a succubus and incubus, etc., were keeping them quiet and possibly even hidden, because anything of a higher vibration or even a mid vibration is not going to want to deal with a lower vibration. So it stands to reason they were there with you all along. And I would love to hear how you got through this and what your journey's been like ever since this happened. Now, Michael, I know you and I have an interesting history of going back and forth in emails, but I haven't heard from you in a while. So hit me up and give me a little bit more information and context. And when you do that, I will share it with the listeners. So our next listener encounter comes from everyone's favorite basement dwelling dragon, our very own Ghost Dragon ZW. This story includes our old ghosty and 3 other guys, his friends when he was little, and I've got to admit, it's a doozy. It was a doozy to edit, but after breezing through it, I knew I had to include it here, and I think this one might be one that a lot of you are able to relate to in one way or another. He says, quote, "Back when I was younger, about 7 or 8 years old, I was playing with some friends on our street. We were just kicking a ball around. We were down close to the cemetery where I live. There were 4 of us, me, Mike, Todd, and Brent. We had been playing around the entrance of the cemetery for a good hour or so. It was about 1:30 in the afternoon on a summer day in the month of June. There was never really any traffic in our street, even though there was an entrance to the cemetery, and a lot of folks used the main entrance off the main street through town. What we were doing by this time was I was standing basically in the street in front of my house facing the graveyard's entrance. I would try to kick the ball in between the poles, the entrance. You know how the cemetery has those big gates, trying to kick the ball through there? And my friends would try to block it like in soccer. The entrance was street wide, so the other 3 guys would not only try to block but catch the ball when they would be kicking. The kicker would keep kicking the ball until he got 3 in or someone caught the ball in the air. Well, I had really kicked and slammed the ball really hard, and it hit a tree by them, and it went into the graveyard and rolled behind a line of graves. Now, this graveyard is beautiful. Lots of trees, bushes, flowers, etc. So when the ball rolled behind the tombstones, we lost track of it. So Todd said to me, "You did it. You go get it." I remember laughing at him because he was the oldest there, like 12 or 13. Mike and Brent were like 9 or 10, and then me. I remember saying, "What are you, too chicken to go get it? What are you scared of?" We had all lived there all of our lives. Funny, a 7 or 8-year-old saying that, but I had lived there my whole 7 or 8 years at that point. Todd looked at me and said, "Okay, big man, just go and get the ball." I laughed again and reminded him of how many times we had been out there playing that game, Ghosts in the Graveyard, and asked him why he was suddenly, or at least seemingly so, too scared to go into the cemetery and get the ball. I chuckled again as I relented and said, Fine, I'm going." No sooner had I started to go get it than I noticed Mike also heading in after the ball. He had probably gotten tired of listening to Todd and I argue about it, even though it had all been in good fun. Mike yelled back to me, asking which way the ball had gone. Brent heard him and pointed over to a line of tombstones about 3 lines into the cemetery where there's a bunch of pine bushes. As Mike disappeared around the other side of the bushes, I heard Brent say, "Who's that kid?" Todd and Brent were standing side by side, and we all watched as Mike disappeared behind another bush and tombstone. We saw another, what looked to be a boy a year or so younger than me, heading towards Mike from the right-hand side. The boy was coming from the deeper part of the cemetery, somewhat like he was coming directly from out of the woods. We started yelling at the kid, asking, "Hey kid, who are you?" But he never responded back to us. None of us had ever seen him before, not ever. So as we watched, the boy, or at least that's what we thought it was, just another young boy, just like us, started making his way towards Mike. Mike was yelling to us that he still couldn't see the ball. As we watched, the kid walked closer and closer to Mike, and essentially closer to us. We all realized that despite how close he was, we couldn't really make out any features or anything about him. He was so close, and yet we wouldn't have been able to even describe what he looked like from that distance. Maybe it was about 10 feet, possibly less, so why couldn't we really see him? Brent yelled out to the rest of us, asking why we could only see the kid when he was behind a tombstone, and when he wasn't behind a tombstone, it's like he was there, but he wasn't, because we couldn't describe him at all, and he didn't come in clearly, so to speak, until he was standing behind one of the graves. Todd looked over at me and somewhat whispered, "He's right. I can only see that kid when it's behind a tombstone." All of a sudden, we heard Mike yelling, "Hey kid, give me that ball." Then we heard Mike start screaming, "What the hell?" And we saw the ball come bouncing over the one tombstone towards Mike from where the boy had just been standing. By the time I noticed all of this, Mike was already leaping over tombstones and running as though his behind were on fire, trying to get out of that cemetery and away from whatever it was he had just seen. As he ran past me and our other two friends, he screamed for us to run and to get the hell out of there. Mike's face was all flushed out, and I could tell he was scared and didn't even care about hiding it at that time. We tried to catch up with him, but he ran straight home, never slowing down or looking back at us, and screaming all the way, What the? Just for some perspective, I lived closest to the cemetery and Todd lived directly across from me. Mike lived up the street a little ways and Brent lived further up the road than Mike, farthest from the cemetery. We stopped in the road just between my house and Todd's across the road, and we all started wondering out loud what Mike could have possibly seen that could have freaked him out so badly. We also wondered where that weird kid had gone and asked one another if maybe the kid had done or said something we hadn't seen or heard, and if that's what caused Mike's freak out, which, by the way, was highly out of character for him particularly. After a few moments of speculation amongst each other, we all went back to our respective homes and called it a day. The next day, Todd and I went up the street to see if Mike wanted to walk up to the carryout to get some munchies and a pop. It's soda. But Mike wouldn't leave his house. In fact, he wouldn't come out at all, not even to play, for a few weeks. His mom kept telling us that he was sick, but we didn't believe her. It just wasn't like Mike, and at one point we literally saw him hiding when we came to the door. We didn't see Mike again for that entire month of June, and it wasn't until July 3rd that he resurfaced. On that day, there was a little fair at a small park on the other side of the main road through town. Me, Todd, and my brother, also named Mike, and who I will be referring to from now on as my brother, stopped to see the other Mike. We went to see if he wanted to walk up to the fair with us, and he actually said that he wanted to come. We were happy that he was coming out to hang with us again after almost an entire month of not seeing him at all, but we soon realized that he had only agreed to leave the house and come to the fair with us because his mother and father kind of forced him to. He just didn't want to leave his house, and he didn't want to talk about why. As we walked up to the fair, Mike and I started talking about what happened that day. I asked him what he had seen and why it had affected him so negatively. I was curious, of course, but I was also concerned for my friend and wanted to make sure that he was going to be okay. Mike finally told me what he saw. He told me that he had to go and grab the ball for us, and as he bent over to pick it up, a pair of small hands picked the ball up instead. He said he was scared but looked up to see who the hands belonged to and saw that same small boy, the kid the rest of us had been yelling to, but he only saw half of him. As if that wasn't bad enough, he said that when he looked into the kid's eyes, there was nothing but darkness. His eyes were all black. The little boy then gave him what he described as, quote, a creepy smile, end of quote, and asked if he could play too. He explained that he didn't know what to do except answer the kid and try to get away from him as quickly as possible without showing too much fear, and so he just simply responded, "No, you're too young to play with us." The little boy turned and threw the ball over the bush, looking straight into Mike's eyes and literally damning him. He literally said, "Damn you forever," and then disappeared right before his eyes into nothingness. Mike was obviously overwhelmed at this point and turned and ran for his life, and that's when we followed him. He admitted that for the rest of the whole month, when he wouldn't come outside, he had been having terrible nightmares of the ghost kid, though he couldn't remember anything about them except that the kid was there and was somehow tormenting him. He hadn't had any nightmares in days, and that's the only reason, aside from his parents forcing him, that he had decided to come with us to the fair. He told me that day that he thought that maybe the ghost was finally going to leave him alone. After he finished telling me all of that, he told me he never wanted to discuss it ever again and wanted us all to just move on from it and stop talking about it. So we never brought it up and we never talked about it again. We eventually lost touch a few years later, and a couple of years ago I ran into Mike's sister, who was a few years ahead of me in school, but who I knew when I was little because of always going to Mike's house to either get him to come out or hanging out there with him and her being there. I asked how Mike was, and she told me he never got over what had happened to him in the cemetery, and he became a heavy alcoholic, using anything and everything he could get his hands on to drown out the memories of that day and the nightmares that haunted him afterwards and still haunt him to this day. We said our goodbyes, and I haven't seen Mike or his sister in the last couple of years. I had always had the feeling that the little ghost boy hadn't ever stopped haunting him and would never stop, but I pray often that maybe now it will and Mike can finally have some peace in his life, end quote. So Ghost Dragons, thank you so much, sweetie, for sending in that amazing story. There's a lot to unpack here. So I know you're kind of like me where you always see things, especially around cemeteries, and I also at one point in my young life, and I was 6 or 7 years old actually, because I turned 7 in the house, lived near a cemetery. I lived directly across the street from one. What I found interesting here though was that everybody could see this little ghost boy, right? It wasn't just you. So that had to have been kind of tremendous for you at that point to be like, wow, everyone else can see this kid as well. But it also makes me wonder, was it actually a spirit, you know, a human spirit? With the all black eyes, I do tend to wonder, like, could it have been some sort of like black-eyed kid prototype, or I don't know. I just have a hard time understanding, like in this one, I don't get the feeling that it actually was either an earthbound spirit or a human spirit. I feel like it was something else hiding in disguise that was pissed off you guys were running around the cemetery that day. And there are gatekeepers and guardians of a lower vibration in most cemeteries that try to collect the earthbound human spirits that end up there, usually with their bodies when they're lost and confused. So I don't know what your take on that is. And guys, let me know your opinions and things like that in the comments. I am always open to hear your guys' interpretation of what Steven and I discuss and what I discuss here in these videos. Our next encounter comes from someone who wants to remain anonymous, and he wrote in, quote, "Hey Gemma, hope that you are doing well. Here is my encounter story for your channel. I went to college in the 80s and things were a lot more fun back then." Yeah, I bet. "I lived off campus in a sort of ramshackle apartment building near the college, which were both in a rough area of town. We were poor college students, but really enjoyed the independence of living off campus provided us, and so my roommate and I both worked multiple jobs to pay rent and bills, and to also afford some time out on the town and partying with the other kids from our school. It was the middle of winter, and temperatures in that state and in that area at the time were known to dip below freezing all of the time in the winter, and it had been snowing at that time for days. Of course, the heat in our building had gone out, or it had broken or something, but we didn't live in a building with other college kids, and it was mainly old, possibly drug-addicted people, and there was no maintenance on site. We called the landlord and the maintenance number all week and complained that we had no heat and were freezing cold. We had nowhere else to go though, and we couldn't go home or too far away from school because freshmen weren't allowed to have their vehicles on campus and we had to get to school somehow. We resigned ourselves to just bundling up and making the best of a bad situation until we can get a hold of the landlord. We knew that if nothing else, he would be there at the end of the following week to collect the rent. There was no way to just digitally or electronically send someone money back then, and he didn't accept checks either. One night, to make matters worse, the storm had knocked out the power in the whole neighborhood, so the whole building was out. I had just bundled up under a bunch of covers when I heard my roommate come in from one of his jobs. It was around midnight. I fell asleep, and about an hour later, I was woken up to pounding on the front door of our apartment. It was like someone was kicking in the door, and I heard my roommate yelling for me to let him in right now. He sounded panicked and frantic, and I immediately jumped up, still woozy from sleep, and ran to the front door. Now, my roommate's bedroom was off to the left of the front door, right when you walked in, and I heard him snoring from inside of his room, even with the door closed, as I stood there. I tried looking through the little peephole into the hallway, but saw no one there, even as my roommate's voice softly spoke to me through the door. Let me in, man. Come on. There's something out here with me. I backed away from the door and suddenly it started shaking with someone rattling the doorknob trying to get in, but whoever was out there, it was still using my roommate's voice. I was as quiet as could be and I bent down to look at the crack at the bottom of the door. There was a good 2 inches to see if I could see who was out there or if anyone was there at all. I thought I was losing my mind or maybe lucid dreaming, as I had known myself to do for a while at the time. I peeked under the door and saw a set of boots, but they were translucent. I could see right through them despite it being too dark to see anything in the hallway. It was like there was an illumination to the person or entity, whatever it was. I yelled for it to go away, and finally my roommate must have heard the commotion and walked out of his room. I whispered to him that he needed to be quiet, and suddenly a terrifying and demonic voice, it sounded almost like more than one person talking, but saying the same thing at the same time, mockingly asked if we were scared, and once again demanded we let it in. My roommate told it or them to go away and forced me away from the door. It was silent in the hallway and he went back into his room. As I walked down the hall to go back to my room, I couldn't help but turn around, and that was the first time I ever saw the so-called Hat Man. I wrote to you about this encounter because I thought that you might be able to help me understand what was happening here. The lights were on when we woke up the next morning, and so was the heat, but I had to move within 6 months of that incident because I was visited and harassed, held down in bed during sleep paralysis episodes ever since the night I just told you about, up until when I moved. My roommate became slovenly and lazy, eventually dropping out of school, and when I left, he seemed almost possessed. He would sit in his room all day just staring at a static television. It was so creepy, and he barely spoke to me anymore after that. Once I moved, I didn't experience any of it anymore and was eventually able to move on. But even with social media, I've never been able to find out what happened to him or what became of him, and I've never understood what happened to me, to us, that night. Thanks for listening. You can share this anonymously if you want to. End quote. Now, just so you guys know, this guy and I did end up doing some work together, and we did end up figuring some things out about what could have possibly been happening to him or why and things like that. So I had to go back and contact him and ask, what I was able to share. And I did get some updates as well. His roommate, unfortunately, ended up taking his own life within 10 years of the initial event. And for that, I was really sad to hear that. They lived in a building at that time where people were mostly addicted and probably going through some things. So that brings the energetic vibe of the building down super low. I speculated that perhaps one of the other tenants had been messing around with the occult, or maybe even they overdosed or passed away, leaving this restless and demonic spirit roaming around without a host. Maybe they picked it up when they overdosed, but there's no way to tell because even the overdose is speculation. I believe that someone in that building somehow got rid of a very lower vibrational, very evil, and possibly even demonic attachment that they either inadvertently picked up somewhere through their lifestyle or that they purposefully conjured. It could also be that this entity, whatever it was sent to or sicked on them. I see this often with what I call addiction demons, whose host gets off the drugs or alcohol, and then the addiction demon is left blowing in the wind until another unfortunate lost soul comes along. Not really lost, but directionless for the moment maybe, and that's when the attachment will latch on. One more thing is that it could have been attracted to our guy's light. He knew how to lucid dream and lived a very spiritual lifestyle, and therefore he did know a little bit about keeping himself in a higher vibration, remaining positive and being kind and all of that. His roommate, however, was another story and was fairly reluctant to even learn anything about the spiritual aspect of life. These two men were perfect targets, but obviously the less light individual spirit or even just their body is more susceptible to attachments like this. So as far as the Hat Man and shadow entity attacks, I believe that was just a projection that the entity wanted to show itself as. I believe this entity could have gotten and did get into the house without them needing to let it in. I don't think it was like a vampire or BEK type thing where it needed to be invited, because I believe the minute they both left that door and decided to turn their backs on it, it came right through and showed itself as the Hat Man. It wanted the fear. Maybe it traveled with something that needed the permission from the human being for the entry, but I don't believe that this thing does. I know it's possible for shadow people to attack the living, and not only during sleep paralysis, but for some reason that just feels wrong to me in this case. I believe that this spirit, whatever it was merely unable to manifest other than in shadow due to its extreme lack of light, and that's just how it happened to present itself. Not as the Hat Man, mind you, but as this shadow person. This, in turn, called the Hat Man to the situation. It's a domino effect, just like happiness, peace, joy, and love are domino effects. So all of the lower vibrational emotions and feelings are too. We've done a lot of shadow work, and we worked a lot on bringing his light and energetic vibration back up, and this witness is now a good friend who helps others deal with similar issues. Moving on. Quote, "Hi Gemma, my name is Denise, and this is what happened to me when I was little. My mom and dad had just gotten divorced but remained civil. I was around 5 years old at the time and stayed with my mother and my siblings in the house we grew up in while my dad moved across town, still very close to us, into an apartment. I loved going to visit with him, and I even had my own room at his house. One day, my dad had to work a Sunday, which was unusual, and left my oldest sister in charge of us. She was 13 at the time. She and my older brother, aged 10, sat and watched TV for hours, and my being a little kid, I got bored. They refused to play with me, so I went running up to my room crying. This is one of my first memories, so bear with me as things are a little fuzzy, but I spoke to my siblings and my parents, and I'm sure I got the whole story for you now. Anyway, I ran upstairs crying up to my bedroom, and as I did, I heard something above my head, like someone stomping. I was on the second floor, and so as far as I knew, there was only the roof above us. I stopped to listen and heard it again. Then someone whispered my name. I looked up and noticed a pull string, like for an attic crawl space, though I didn't know that's what it was at the time. I was scared, but the voice sounded friendly and like that of a nice old man, like my grandpa, is how I thought of it. The voice stopped and I walked away, and I soon forgot all about it. But later that night, my dad tucked me into bed and closed my door. I had a small night light right next to the walk-in closet where I would build forts. I heard movement in the closet, but before I even had time to get scared about it, that same kindly old voice came from the closet and said my name and told me not to be scared. I walked over curiously, thinking I had made a new friend and not realizing how strange it was that an old man would be in the closet of my bedroom calling me to him. I was hesitant, but as I approached the closet and stopped, the door opened and creaked open. I looked inside and heard the same voice telling me it was okay and to come inside the closet and play. I walked into the closet, and the moment I did, the door slammed, and I heard the old man laughing from the outside of the door. I screamed and tried to open the door, but it was jammed, like he was holding it shut or something, and the string to pull the light on and off wasn't working as I tried desperately to pull it over and over again to get the light on. I banged on the door and screamed and cried until finally my dad came bursting into the closet, asking me what the hell I thought I was doing. The door opened for him immediately, and as soon as he pulled the string for the light, it turned right on. I was terrified and insisted I slept with my dad that night. He gave in and let me, but the next time I went there, I was attacked in my room while I was laying in bed. I had been pretending to sleep and heard the closet door opening and closing and the creaking of the floorboards as whatever had come out of the closet approached the side of my bed. I was too scared to do anything and didn't want to open my eyes. I heard the old man tell me he knew I was awake and that I needed to open my eyes. He was very charming, and even apologized for the last time with the closet incident. I opened my eyes, and I swear to you, Gemma, there was a gigantic demonic thing there in my room with me. I can't even describe how horrible and hideous it was, and it grabbed me by my throat as soon as I started to scream. It almost pulled me out of my bed when my dad came rushing in and turned on the lights. I don't know exactly what my dad saw, but he didn't give me a hard time and moved soon after. I tried to make this long story short for you, as some other small incidents happened in between these two, and I know my siblings had their own experiences as well. I was traumatized and terrified of the dark for years. The only thing I knew about the apartment is that the old man who lived there before my dad rented it, he had unalived himself by hanging in the attic, and the people downstairs were really weird and possibly into the occult. I had nightmares and had even been attacked during sleep paralysis episodes for most of my life since then, and I still feel like whatever that thing was, whether it was the old man or some sort of demonic creature, is always lurking around me, especially when the lights go off. Despite those intense feelings, I haven't encountered it physically again, nor have I seen it. I grew up and moved away, and I thought of this because recently my granddaughter came to visit, and I heard her talking to her closed closet door. She said she was just playing. She's 6, and I wonder if maybe it was just waiting for the right time, for the right child to strike again and terrorize me through terrorizing her. I'll I'll let you know if anything comes of it. Who knows? I could just be paranoid and she could just be a normal 6-year-old with a regular imaginary friend. Thanks for letting me share." End quote. Okay, so there was a lot to unpack here. Denise, I'm assuming that you found out after the fact, or maybe a little later on, about the people downstairs being possibly into the occult. And it, you know, it's very possible that they either conjured something purposefully or inadvertently accidentally pulled something in that affected the old man, and then the old man got lost somehow or remained earthbound. I mean, it does seem like there's two entities working in tandem, or the old man was just not a good person and therefore the demon was able to mimic it. I mean, the demon would be able to mimic a person whether they're, you know, good or not, but it's just, in my experience, been more likely where it's not so good, happy, loving, well-adjusted, light human beings that are able to that easily be mimicked by demons or demonic activities. So as far as your granddaughter, that would mean you have kids. So whether you have boys or girls, I would really love to know, because if you have a daughter, then why wouldn't it have gone after the daughter? But I will say that a lot of the time, this runs in the females, or at the very least from the maternal side, and it will skip over generations. That is not to say that across the board that's what happened, but it does happen a lot of the time. So keep an eye on this. And you sent me this story in about 3 months ago. Denise, if you're watching, I would love for you to update me and let me know what's going on so I can let the gemstones know. And that's the same for anybody who sent in an encounter. You know, this is the most recent one I received at 3 months ago. So these are somewhat old. As far as the last anonymous person, I've been working with that person, and I basically updated you to the best of my ability from what I know. But anyone else, like, these are old encounters for the most part. So please update me so I can update the gemstones. There were so many stories to choose from here, guys. And for the last one, I'm going to once again, as I've been doing, just randomly pick one. I would love to see more of you guys, my gemstones, members, and familiar names at the top of the email. So please, I know many of you guys have sent them and they ended up lost. Most likely I archived them and don't know how to get back to them, but I plan on doing one of these for the regular channel too. Not only members like this one, the more stories the better, and I will be putting them out regularly now. All right, here we go. Quote, "Hi Gemma, please refer to me as Nick when telling my story because I haven't spoken much about this yet and would like to remain anonymous. When I was around 15 years old in the year 2000, I was just hanging out in my bedroom and watching some TV. I suddenly started feeling a very extreme sense of fear and dread that seemed to have come out of nowhere, and it made me so nervous I instantly started looking all around my room. I had my room set up in the basement, and the room was fairly large, but there were no hidden corners or anything and only one small closet. I could see the whole room besides the inside of the closet from where I was lying in my bed. There wasn't anything in there with me that I could see, but the sense of dread and fear was so palpable that I wanted to run out of there and upstairs into my parents' room. I was 15, like I said, and so I didn't do that, but mainly I didn't do it only because I would have had to have gotten up out of bed, crossed the entire room, and run up the stairs, and I didn't want to take the chance of doing that. Despite not seeing anything, I felt like it was a big risk to take, but I didn't know why. It was just really disturbing and confusing. I remember feeling like that for a long time before my mother finally yelled down to the basement steps like an hour later, telling me I had school the next morning and that it was midnight, that I had to turn off my TV and go to bed. I was so scared, but by then I was also tired, probably from the adrenaline rush of the fear and anxiety that had been coursing through my body that I had been feeling up to that point. I knew I had a little nightlight plugged in on the other side of my room because there were no windows in the basement and no bathroom except at the top of the stairs. And so without the light, I wouldn't have been able to see anything in the pitch black darkness once the lights were turned off. I turned off my TV using the remote, and it was 2000, so it wasn't a flat screen and still had one of those big backs on it. And it was sitting on a stand across from my bed. I got up and turned off the light with the TV still on, but I was really scared when I did it. I got back into bed, and I remember as soon as I flicked the off button on the remote to the TV, it almost hesitated for a second before completely turning off and going black. It was odd, but I tried not to read too much into it, only to see, immediately after, in the pitch darkness of the room, a human-shaped entity standing next to the television and facing the bed as if it were watching me. But it wasn't a shadow or anything like that. It looked like the fuzz from the TV screen that you used to see in the old days when the networks would go off air for the night, and it looked exactly the same as what had just been lingering on the TV after I turned it off. Meaning, I believe, that it was what we call a static entity, guys. And I've talked about these before, and I think I say this at the end. So it looked like the fuzz had just kind of jumped off the TV and taken on shape. However, it was that grayish white static, but with no noise and an orange tint to it. Yeah, it was orange, and it was there for just long enough for me to see it. Once it disappeared, the feelings of dread and fear went with it, and I fell asleep. Throughout my life since then, I've seen this entity 3 more times, but it never speaks, and it always seems to be staring right at me, watching me. Each time I see it, it stays around for longer, but never more than a minute or two, and I know it's watching me and that it's sinister and malevolent in nature. The reason I know that is because of the intense feelings that come on right before I inevitably see it. Like my senses or something know that it's coming. I also know it's watching me, staring me down, even though it doesn't have any features because of its overall body language and just because I know. I've looked this up online, and I know you've done a video about so-called static entities, but look into it again because, believe it or not, more and more people are noticing this entity nowadays, and more it has the orange tint to it. I will keep in touch with you and let you know the next time I see it because I know that I inevitably will. And if you figure anything out about them or come up with any ideas for what it might be or what it wants, please let me know. I live in a constant state of fear when TVs are on around me and don't watch much anymore because of these experiences. I've asked a couple of people in my family if they've ever seen anything strange like this, but none of them have. And we aren't people who technically believe in the paranormal, so I never want to push the issues with them. It has to be showing itself to me for a reason, right? But I just can't figure out what that reason is. I wonder if they're like the shadow people, where they're more than likely some sort of lower vibrational interdimensional, but that's all my own speculation. I love your channel and think you rock. Thanks so much for giving me the space to be able to share my experience. End quote. So static entities aren't one I've ever personally dealt with, but I have done a video, like I've already said, sorry, redundancy, and that are becoming a little bit more common. They're like a mix between, in my opinion, like the Glimmer Man and Shadow People. They're definitely lower vibrational. They never seem to, at least as far as what I know, like attack anyone or anything like that. Like, you're not going to wake up in the middle of the night in a sleep paralysis episode and find a static entity attacking you. Or maybe you will. If you guys know different, please send me the stories. Let me know what you think. And let me know what you think about all of these. But there's just so much that's unknown with these particular entities that I hesitate to even speculate, to be honest, because I like to have more information. I will do some research, and I will go through the research I already have, though, Nick, and get back to you on this. I was just waiting to put the video out because my gemstones, as you know, because you claim to be one of them, are very intuitive when it comes to things like this. And I think a lot can be gleaned from the comments. And if I receive emails, I will certainly tell you what we spoke about. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed hanging out with me, if you enjoyed the content, and if you enjoyed hanging out with one another in the premiere. Now, the way this is going to work is, this is a members only video, but I do not have a lot of members. And if I put the video out for members only and just leave it at that, I'll only get maybe a dozen views, and that brings my entire algorithm down. YouTube doesn't account for the fact that it's memberships, and I'm doing so well now with my channel and growing and thriving. So what I talked to a lot of the members in my live intuitive oracle stream, I asked all of them if they would mind. None of them did. They actually thought it was a good idea. This is going to come out as a premiere at noon on Monday. The Monday it comes out, and it's going to stay for 24 hours as an open public video. After that 24 hours, so noon on Tuesday the 9th, okay, it's going to be privatized and put for members only, and that's how it's going to stay. That way, members do have their own videos. They have access to their own videos, but my whole channel's algorithm doesn't get dragged down because I'm trying to do something for members. Once I get enough members, we're going to be doing members only Oracle live streams, members only regular live streams. I've just got to get that members count up, guys, and that's up to y'all. For you guys who are members, thank you so, so much. It's, I believe, $4.99 a month to be able to have access to all of the videos. And for some other perks that I am aware that I promised, but again, I need more than 7 or 8 members to be able to live up to those promises, but I do definitely plan on it. So consider it, think about it, and I would really appreciate it. And if you're already a member, obviously, thank you so, so much. I always appreciate you guys and everything you guys do for me. If you don't know already, my new book, Danger at Your Door, Encounters with the Black-Eyed Kids, is available on Kindle and paperback in Amazon, and I will put the link along with the link for all of my other books, Missing the Faith Theory, Encounters with Evil, 101 True and Terrifying Stories, and Shadow Entities, Sleep Paralysis, and Beyond. So the links for all 4 books, Kindle and paperback versions, will be in the description box, as well as the tentative weekly schedule for the channel. Now, please be sure to watch the shorts, like the shorts. It's 15 through 60 seconds of your guys' time. The Oracle shorts, I do the singing and kind of rapping, lip syncing shorts. I try to do funny shorts. I do regular shorts, but I always do every single week an update short letting you know what's going to be happening when, and if anything's changing with the schedule that week. So be sure to check those out. That way, if you text me and you're asking me like, hey, are you guys streaming Tuesday at 1 or was that noon? You'll already know because it should be in the upload video. If you guys need anything from me, if you want autographed copies of any of my books, email me, GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com before you make the purchase. I would have loved for this book to go #1 on my own merit. And just keep buying it, guys, because it still could happen. I'm going to be on the Paranormal 60 on January 8th, 2024 with Dave Schrader at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, discussing the new Black-Eyed Kid book, Black-Eyed Kids, and possibly a whole lot more. It's always a good time on the Paranormal 60. Dave Schrader is like one of my heroes. Love him. He is so just genuine and just such a good person. I cannot wait to be hanging out with him that night. I believe that's the same night this video is actually premiering in the afternoon. So go on and check it out. Be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. If no one told you today, you are amazing. 2024 is your most prosperous year. Believe it, insist upon it, and then expect good things and success as if just like when you expect the sun to rise and set. That's how you should be, and you are going to be. I'm claiming it for you now, expecting good things to happen and come to fruition in your guys' lives, okay? And if nobody told you today, I believe in you, and I got your back. Always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.